Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Embodying the Logos. Today, my guest is Bill, and we're kind of going to try and approach the intellectual angle around God and philosophy and like how to think about these things, and what is the road to be walked, or that is walked, right? Because I think we both came from like an atheistic, materialistic background, and yeah, we ended up somewhere unexpected in some way, and that means that something happened somewhere along the road, right? Like what? So maybe we can try and circumambulate that a little bit. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, sounds all right. Yeah, I hope.
So I can tell you what happened to me, right? I started engaging with philosophy in general, but then I came across Peterson and Carl Jung, right? And that opened the spiritual aspect a little bit. Like it was, we always had this idea about these people, right? And they did all this weird stuff, and I was like, why?
Yeah.
And then it somehow became more explanatory, and then I was like, yeah, I started just digging and digging and digging, right? And then I got to Vervaeke, and he had all this crazy stuff about what happened in history, and that there's all of these problems, and then there's perennial problems, which are even worse than normal problems.
All those
and
problems.
I obviously had my own ideas, which maintained themselves across whole path, right? But the way that they were framed changed a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, what about you?
I'll start. Let's start from the beginning, where that beginning is not actually in the beginning; it's probably in the middle. But I was brought up as an atheist, pretty much, directly and explicitly in a weird way. So I have no like religious background at all. When I say religious, I meant it in like the atheist sense back then. So I didn't go to churches or anything like that. Didn't do any religious ceremonies or anything like that. So it was so in that sense, it's very foreign to me. The thing I've always kind of been interested in was psychology, at least always since I was a kid. In many ways, but just how do people tick? And one thing was the learning about psychology, but I also got interested in economics, which sounds like what? Kind of a very weird, like, why is this related? But the thing about an economics is it started to make me understand how the world works at a different level. And also, actually, there are things that you would take as intuitive, like, oh, this are just wrong. Like certain instincts you have about how the world works are just wrong, and you can actually show that they're wrong, not just like logically, but also demonstratively as well. Like you can do the both, the actually showing it, like, hey, look, this what you're saying would lead to contradictions, but also secondly, like, hey, you can see it in the world. This isn't what you think. So why did you believe what you think? And I'm like, oh yeah, why did I believe what I thought? And it was fascinating. It's just one of those kind of rabbit holes. And when you went on this rabbit hole, going through all the YouTube stuff, learning about all the different things, learning stuff, I then came across, of course, as many people do, the Jordan Peterson stuff. And this was just at the time when it was clearly getting popular. But the thing for me wasn't really the politics; it was more of the psychology stuff again. So how do people take and start, and I learned from there. And it was kind of just a downhill thing from there, going in the background, keeping interested. But the thing that you were talking about me tonight is more of the, let's say, the belief aspect itself was more
leap,
of,
right? And there's a leap somewhere.
the leap was more of from, how do I put this?
Well, let's just deal with what is, because you put something on the table, right? And you were talking about a different level of engagement through economics. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So I just kind of got fascinated because it's one of those things where I had a friend, and this, it's weird even at the time. I wouldn't say necessarily recommend it now, but it's just what got me interested in. He sent me a video, effectively on someone probably many people might know is Milton Friedman. And I just watched him. And what I was listening to him was he was explaining things, literally just explaining things basically. I went, wait, why has no one explained this to me ever before? Because one, it wasn't difficult. It wasn't. And secondly, it was very much like, wait a minute, he's saying things that, wait, what? It was just like I could just see the confusion. And I was just watching him literally until early in the morning. My friend got me hooked in this sense, but it was more of a, but as soon as I watched him, I went to go look for everything else I could find out, not just him, but everything else I could find in this topic. I was like, this is just fascinating. And it was just one of those kind of like, you go down a rabbit hole and you start discovering more things. So it was just kind of that. And I'm sorry I'm being very vague on specific because I just don't want to bore on the specifics of actual economics in that regard. But like there's certain things are very obvious once you say it. Of course that's true, but you never actually think of it. Like the simplest thing is like a trade does not take place unless it benefits both parties. It's a really simple statement. And it's true, obviously. But then the question is, okay, but why is that true? And people say, of course it's true. Obviously that has to be the truth. And it's like, no. Why is that true? Because you don't instinctually think that. Because, or I say, not saying instinctually, you may not get taught that either. Like someone says, oh, to make business, one of the people have to benefit over the other. I'm like, no, both people benefit. They think they do at least.
Well, yeah, not intellectually necessarily, but subconsciously, right?
Yeah.
And then the question is because what are you trading, right? You're trading value against other value, right?
And the beauty of that thing is it's both subjective as well. It's subjective value. And all of economics is subjective. And it's all dealing with the idea of subjective value and on this modern economics as well, but also on the margins, things on the margins, where you value things like, for instance, a good example of this is water. You don't value water very much at all, really. And that's because on the margins, you don't have much. So like, for instance, you bathe yourself in it, have loads of that thing, and then you drink it and all that lot. It's not very worth much, but it's the most precious thing to life. You need water. But because of how abundant it is, on the margins, you don't care about it. But for diamonds, say something like diamonds are hard to come by. Many people seem to value them. So therefore, if you have one on the margins, you can have more and more diamonds and it's more valuable to you. It's not like they're really common to you. They are very common technically. But the water diamond thing is a really common thing out of like classical economics, because in classical economics, they believe in like objective value of economics. And it leads to these paradoxes. It doesn't make any sense. But they were trying to square it. And it wasn't until the mid 19th century when loads of people independently at once, which is interesting, like these 3 different economists from different parts of the world all independently came up with the same idea, which again, it's fascinating in itself. Just kind of like there must have been a moment to get there. And they all kind of got there at the same time. And they all just went, no, value is subjective, and it's subjectivism and marginalism, those 2 things together. And it solves all the paradoxes and actually describes reality. It doesn't describe, like the other previous ones didn't. You could get far with them, but it was like that. It was like, oh, that's the fascinating bit. And that's what I was saying is you're looking at a different level of analysis. You're not just trying to like go based on instinct anymore, but it's more of you are going to a bit more reasoning here, obviously. But then you're also tying it back to your instincts and like, actually, no, this is how we actually know things with regards to this stuff to a certain extent. Only this stuff. Not everything, obviously, but on that level. And then you can start seeing how it scales. Like one of the things that I was saying with Milton Friedman.
No, hold on. So I heard a couple of things, right? So you're talking about something objective, right? Which basically means to assign something in realities.
Yes.
Right. Instead of putting it in relationship to you, right? So
correct.
Making this step into a relational framework, right? Like it's not only happening within economics. They have to reinvent the wheel everywhere. And then this other thing, paradoxes, and that, like, I actually was going to mention paradoxes before you mentioned it, because like the way that I describe religion is that which allows you to transcend a paradox, right? Because the paradox are like occurs when the way that you're framing your relationship, right, is incorrect, right? Like, or incompatible with reality. And in order to transcend that, you need to find a new way to relate, right? Like there's insufficiency. And then when you perceive that, or at least for me, right? Like when you perceive that, oh, like there's this other way, and this other way is actually better because like it can allow for more, right? Like now there's a well, it's not a causality, but there's a there's a way of attaining intelligibility that's not horizontal, right? But it starts getting vertical, and it's like, oh, right, like what is the thing that can draw most into itself? And like so I think when you're getting into a rabbit hole, right, you're building up the base that can push you up a little bit, and that's what you're seeking, right? Like that's what drawing you in.
Indeed, very much so. Sorry, the thing I was just going to just note there, it was just more of a, I was a train of thought there, but yeah, this is what fascinated. One thing is another level is auto analysis, which was fascinating to me. Was, it was the Milton Friedman thing, and it doesn't technically come from him. The original one is from God, what was his name, Leonard something, another economist. But Milton Friedman was one of the first telling it, and it was the story of a pencil. And his statement is that, oh, imagine I've got a pencil in my hand. I don't own a pencil right now for some reason. I only have pens. But imagine I've got a pencil, and he says, look, not a single person on this planet could make a pencil. And you go, wait, well, what do you mean? I'm like, that's not a stupid statement. It's like, no. You think, oh, of course you could. I'm like, no. First, you have to get the wood. Where does the wood come from? Well, if I'm going to take the, if say, like in this country, I'd probably go up north. It comes from Cumbria or something like that. You get the wood made there. Great. So how did you get that wood? Well, they have to chop it down. Okay, so what chopped it down with? Oh, you've got people get with axes. Okay, where the axes come from? Well, they've got the steel. Okay, so where's the steel come from? And all that. And you have to keep going down the train. It's like, okay, let's just get the wood. Okay, so then what it's like, okay, what about the lead inside of it, which is not really lead, it's actually graphite. So where's the graphite coming from? Okay, so how did they get the graphite? Where do they mine it? Where did they get this? Where's this people? Oh, and it's like, okay, so you're getting all this coordination. And then that's just that. Then you've got the question of the paint. Where's the paint come from? It's actually made from like all around the world. Then you've got the rubber. And the rubber is actually, rubber is originally from like Indonesia, but then it's been replanted in other places around like South America, usually. And then they're being made the rubber there. And then you've got the little metal around it on the pencil to hold the rubber on. And that's from another place in the world. It's like you've got literally thousands of people around the world produce one pencil. And most of these people would probably hate each other if they came into contact with each other. They'd have different religions. They can't even speak the same language. But somehow it all comes together and you make a pencil. So it's not literally, there's not a single person in the world that could make just that pencil, because to get it, you would have to have this literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of people interacting with each other somehow through effectively the price system. Literally, the price system is just a system of signals that signal out information to different people somehow, and whatever that information may be. And then it comes together to make a pencil. And it's just something as simple as that, which was, again, it was one of those mind-blowing things, but it was also there's something else governing this system. It's not just individuals. There's a price system, is for one thing, but also there's a lot of other things going on, and it's just, in a weird way, you could not centrally plan that. You couldn't get a committee to design a pencil, make a pencil, because like, no, look at how, even now in this system, how could you make one? You can't start from scratch. You're relying on all these other things and all these. Sorry, that's kind of a weird analogy, but when I first heard it, I went, "Oh, wow." By the way, we're stopping in economics now. I've not got to anything to do with religion yet.
Well, I can make a small step in that direction.
Yeah,
because Peterson talks about making a contract with the spirit of culture, right?
Yeah,
because what is this person that's doing the mining somewhere, right? Like, they don't know about the pencil. Like,
no, they don't.
They have no clue, right? But what they're doing is they're providing this product, and like they're just having faith that someone is gonna need it somewhere, right? And like part of it is that they're bound, right? They have specialized in such a way that they're kind of like committed to providing the product. But the other half is like, no, like it's always been reliable. Like, someone is going to take the product at a price that's apparently able to sustain their lives, right?
Yeah.
There's this weird thing where you're having this contract with this nebulous thing, right? Like this potential, and then like the way, like one time it will go into I don't know, like some windows or whatever, right? Like they're gonna put it into a pencil, or they're gonna put it into something else, like a battery, and it's like, yeah, like it doesn't matter where it goes. What matters is that this system
it goes somewhere.
alive,
It doesn't matter
right?
where
Like,
it goes. It is matter that it actually goes, because it's weird that you have this, and you do have a leap of faith in that system, that culture, that you could actually even believe that this would actually even work. But it's very much a there is a faith leap argument there. There is a bit of this weird, like, actually, if you try and break this down, it doesn't make any sense. But it's like you shouldn't break it down is the first thing. But it's very much the like, if you try and break it down, you go insane, because it's not going to work. But secondly, it's
I want to go to the second part of the faith, right? Because like, the first person who's going to take this stuff up, right? Like they're just making a big ass leap of faith, and then they start the company. But then you have the second generation, right? And the second generation, like they didn't go through this building up, right? They're just inheriting all of this stuff. And then you have the third generation, and for them it's always been that way, right? And so for them, is it still a leap of faith, or are they like born into it, right? Like, are they born into the system where it's axiomatically true that whenever you dig up this graphite or whatever, like, you're going to be able to sell it? And it's not even a question anymore. Like, it's just like,
it's the point. It's where, like, I run a business. I'm starting up another one, and the first thing, again, with the new one I'm starting up, is very much like, can I even sell the product that I'm making? Like, that is the question. Like, doesn't matter how good the product is, can I sell it, and people buy it? And there is a leap of faith that I believe that they would be, otherwise I wouldn't have started this business. And I do take, it's very much the, like, oh, I'm worrying, like, oh, will they buy what I'm making, and how would I sell that? Because I have to market, I have to convince people, yes, this is a good product, let's try and do it. And you have faith, one, that people are interested, bother to even get it. But I also had faith in myself that, I've actually got the skills to do this, I can do this. So there's all these levels of, I'm not hoping, but I don't expect it. Because the thing is, if you're in a certain industry, like if you're working for someone and not working for yourself, you expect, of course they're running a business. Of course you can sell. This is what we do as a business. I've got a contract with my employer. Obviously, it's going to be fine. I mean, it's a very different dynamic there in that regard, because the employer and the employee are a very different thing. The employer's like, my stable, I've got these employees I've got to take care of, but I'm trying to sell things with the employee. And I'm trying to be very one-sided here, obviously, but the employee is like, oh yeah, I've got a job. Clearly, I've got a contract with this person. Clearly, there's this. I believe this company's stable to a certain extent, not always, and I'll probably get into that later. But and it's just kind of there is that weird faith belief. There's this belief that you have in things, which it is rational in a technical sense of the word, but it's not. How do I put this? It's not reducible.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about this problem, right? Like, so you're brewing beer, right? And like, yes. I imagine that when in the 1600s you start brewing beer, right? Like, you do it, and then you do it for yourself and maybe your neighbors, right? And then you bring it to church one day or whatever for like a gathering or whatever.
Oh yeah, traditionally you'd brew it at home. So you'd brew it for yourself at home. Usually it'd be very weak, and then you'd be drinking it pretty much straight away. Many people who did this either did it because they like the taste, or in certain areas, like if you're living in a town, you may not have had clean water. So this was the only way to make the water clean. But if you lived in a village, like you had a river or a stream and it was clean enough, then you didn't need to do that, obviously. But the other places that certain pubs would have done it, so the pubs would have brewed it, and then they would bring it up to their customers, obviously. And that's what they would have done, not just for they extend it from their family. Now they're trying to make a business. And then someone said, oh, I could actually do that. And you specialize in selling it, and I specialize in brewing it, obviously, like that. And it builds up. And you can see the history of that again, at least in England, throughout the history.
Yeah, and that would really organically grow, right? And it would be integrated in something else, right? Or you'd be having a pub, right? And you'd be brewing for yourself, and then your neighboring pub is like, dude, like, your beer is way better. Like, let me get some of your beer or whatever. Right. So there be this progression. And like, I feel like when you start your business, right, like the way that you go about it, it's not natural, right? Like, you have to like go to places or whatever. And
oh, then there's also the legal aspects of what the government's telling you what you have had to do and such. Like and this is public knowledge to know, but when you actually set up a business to sell beer, you have to go through this type of licensing. And one thing is this: the government forces you to do, which I think is absolutely rude that I'm having to do this. And I've had to apologize to everyone. It's like, hey, the government's told me that I have to go to round pubs and ask for them to get letters of intent saying, hey, you're not a customer yet, but are you interested in the possibility of buying my product? And could you do a favor and just write this, sign it for me, please? It's one of the most backwards things I have to do, because organically in any other industry, you'd be trying to sell stuff and you'd go, look, hey, you could try out my product. Here you go, try it. I'm like, I haven't even got a product yet, but I'm asking you to do a favor.
Right, and then you have the Kickstarters and stuff, right? That like,
yeah,
so it's like a really weird business where we're dealing with hypotheticals, right? And then if there's enough potential, like if there's enough energy in the system, then we just give it a kickstart and bootstrap it.
But again, I started clearly as a home brewer. Like, I did it as a hobby, as like learning how to do it myself and doing it just for friends, starting for myself and then to friends and family, and then eventually started doing it for like the community and charity events and such, which is why I started the business. I thought, oh, people were actually enjoying what I was doing. And I thought, you know what, I could probably try and extend this, scale it up a little bit, only a little bit, because I don't want to scale up too much and then you've wasted all that money and it's failed. So it's very much kind of that thing, but there's kind of that each time you do it, you kind of a leap of faith. You're testing the waters in many ways. And it's not a jump. It's not like a jumping. It's just like, I put my little toe in here and I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Okay. I'm putting that bit, I'll be fine. So you can always go back. You can always go back. So that's the thing. It's not a leap. It's just if I fail at this point, like if this business fails, it could. Oh, well, fine. I've lost a bit of money.
I guess one of the distinction is that, like in the past, there was more of a need, like an obvious need, right? Like yeah. Like in religion, there's this calling, right? Like, oh yeah, this is obviously lacking, and I think that we're not intimate enough with the space that we're in, right? To know what the lack is, or like to even taste that, right?
Yeah. Like I always say, I've got a little bit of an instinct where, for me, as let's say just a British Englishman in general, pubs are something people in England kind of take for granted, but they're also kind of dying out, not due to pubs. It's just there's loads of reasons why they're dying out. It's not actually many of them's not their fault either. But I think the thing is, when I've had like some foreign colleagues and they've come to this country, one of the first things they ever want to do is go to a pub, because they don't have that. French people do not have a pub. They may have a brasserie, which is not really a pub. And it's like they want to go to a pub because it's a very different experience. It's very much like no, this is where something you go. You can go meet up with your friends. You have a good chat. You can have a drink. You don't have to drink. Some people don't have to drink alcohol. You can have lemonade. You can have water. Whatever. It doesn't matter. You don't usually care. You may have something to eat, but it's a gathering place to meet. And it's a very secular gathering place. And many people, the joke is always historically in this country, when you've gone to church in the morning, you then go to the other church at the pub at lunch. And many people used to do that because then you've met people and then you come to meet your friends in the gathering space to talk. And it's something which, as the pubs have been dying down, clearly it's been dying out as well. And now people also, especially my generation and younger, they don't usually go out as much and they don't really want to go to the pubs and such because it's a weird thing. Like, people aren't meeting in the gathering place anymore. And there's where half the problem's coming in. So you see this kind of
here, right? Like,
but we're meeting here. We're meeting digitally. We're not meeting physically.
Yeah,
we're not meeting physically.
No space involved.
No, and then that's half the problem. And I guess with also pubs, one of the reasons why
I can't drink your beer. Like,
yeah, I could drink at home, and that's fine. But like, it's not the same thing. And but that kind of is also probably one thing in my own head is like, look, I'm going to pubs, and they don't have good beer. They've got all these beers made by the big corporations. They're all extremely consistent, like the McDonald's of beer, put it that way. And it's like, you know what you're going to get to any pub you go to. And it's like, okay, so why would I go to that pub over that pub? Or not just that. I'm like, why would I drink this beer when I can first off get it cheaper at the supermarket? And I can also get a better selection. It's better. It's like, it's always the, and from an economic standpoint, why would I do this? Because people think from a very consumerist standpoint, like, why would I want to go here? It's like, no, you shouldn't be thinking that. You should just thinking like, oh, I'm going there. Obviously, I should go there. What are you talking about? Because again, people 40 years ago would not question that. They wouldn't.
Yeah, but what changed is that since everything has been standardized, like what they're selling is not the product, they're selling the experience, right? Like they're selling the atmosphere, which like yes, but also no. Like they have to be integrated in some way.
Indeed. Because you can't just have and also this is also the problem is a lot of pubs are like owned by breweries, like the really big ones, I should say, not small ones. And as a result, clearly they've got the same beers everywhere. And what I'm saying is that people are then viewing these as places where I can get a beer anywhere. Why would I go to this building? And they're forgetting that there was a part that was integral, like literally the heart of the community. Usually, literally, this would be historically speaking in a village. You'd have a pub, you'd have a church, and you maybe have a post office. That's how integral they were, and it's very much something people forget that. And some people understand it, usually older generation, but the younger generation doesn't. And they just go like, well, yeah, I can go wherever, it's fine. Or I'll go to a better place where they have dancing, or like it's like a club or something like that. Or I'll go to like, it's very much a very weirdly, not individualistic is the right word here in this case, but
consume.
Consume. This is very consumerist in a very derogatory term of that sense. I can praise consumerist in another way, obviously, but this way is not very. It's very.
No, it's
immediate. It's immediate. That's the word I'm looking for. Immediate gratification,
right? Like but like the important part is that if you go to a pub, you build something. You build relationships, right? If you go to like all of these other places, right, you have relationships, right? But they're drunk, right, or like close to drunk with live music, and they're not sustained, right? Like they're just functional, instead of living together, right? Like living.
Indeed.
And so I want to go back to this whole idea, right? So we described kind of like this new way of being, right, of dealing with economics, with the social stuff, right, and what fate means in that context is somewhat different, right, because well, like I've been talking about the intimacy crisis, right, like there's a lack of intimacy, and a lack of intimacy changes, like the leap becomes bigger, right, like you have to jump farther. So so when you were on your discovery journey, right, like you and I, right, we took the intellectual route over the experiential, which is probably the worst thing that you could ever do in your life.
For me, I don't think it was. I'll explain, but the problem is it did lead me to a very, very dark path. So after getting the John Pearson, I got into Jonathan Peugeot, and then me and my same friend who got me to economics, he was like, "Oh, have you heard of this Paul van der Klee chap as well?" And then this is very in the early days anyway. It's like, "Oh, I'll check him out." And then clearly that's how we met anyway, obviously in many ways. So it's kind of from there. But it was still in the background. I was still an atheist all this time. Very, not a new atheist, just an atheist in that sense. What I mean is, a new atheist is a very particular kind of atheist. Like some like the Charles, Christopher Hitchens, the Richard Dawkins, the Daniel Dennett, and what's his name, Sam Harris kind of people. That specific kind of, and I was never kind of enticed by them really. I always liked, or I did always like Richard Dawkins, but mainly for his biology work than really his religious work. And when his religious work, he was more of a, in the best ways, he's making fun of dumb people. They always were. All of them were. They're making fun of these dumb people, or making fun of these, but rightly so.
Making fun of themselves for not taking the serious position seriously, right?
Yeah, in many ways. This is the thing is, and there's always this thing always sticks in my mind where I remember Richard Dawkins said he had a conversation with used to be the Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams or Robinson or something like that, and there's a lot of books he's written anyway, and he kept this going, and Richard Dawkins kept saying, So, it was like really interesting because every time I said, he would finish effectively what my position was. He knew exactly what my position was. And then it literally, this is what Dawkins went, but why doesn't he agree with me then? He literally did not. And it was just, I remember listening to this and I went, oh, not just that. It says this person, Rowan Williams, clearly Archbishop Canterbury, one of the top in the church, obviously, the Church of England, was like, he literally understood Richard Dawkins. Sorry, I'm saying Charles, I don't know why. Richard Dawkins' position here. And Richard Dawkins was like, well, he understands it. Why doesn't he agree with me then? He had no comprehension that maybe, no, he understands it. That's why he doesn't agree with you. Kind of position. It never even crossed his mind. There was a bit of a weird idiocy crossed with hubris, which is my most hated character trait, which is why it kind of stuck in my mind still to this day. But to carry on, I went down this path, all this stuff, and I was still interested in it. And then I got a job. I won't say which job it is, obviously, but I had this particular job, and I had a lot of time on my hands. And when you have a lot of time on your hands and you can't do work, you start contemplating things, basically your own existence. And during this time, clearly I was reading a lot of things, and effectively I just kept questioning. I came to the point, effectively, I started self-destructing, literally deconstructing my own beliefs, saying, why do I believe what I believe? And I got to the conclusion, and I wasn't wrong in my conclusions, there is no reason for believing what I believe. And in fact, I got to a kind of an existential nihilism. Like, I got to a point where I was nihilistic, like, not in the bad sense, like, I got to the point where I can't believe anything I'm stating, so therefore maybe there isn't such thing as morality. There isn't such thing as only this. There is no meaning to things. And it's a very dark place. You get to effectively an existential depression. And it's completely intellectualized, because again, I was effectively
it's
alone. I was alone. There was no integration with anything. I was so isolated.
Yeah,
even though I had a job, was speaking people
from yourself into the world, right? And it's like, well, what is the place that I'm standing on, that I'm making that move from? And you realize that if you keep taking a step back, right, like you come at a smaller and smaller space, and at a certain point.
Well, it's not even the smaller and smaller space. It's more of a, how do I believe in this thing, but there's literally nothing to justify what I believe. Like, I cannot find the justifications for this belief. So therefore, the belief is probably wrong. That was kind of the view. And you get to a very much like, there's certain things I start to believe. Like, clearly I was believing, like, okay, this pair of pliers exists. Like, clearly I was still getting a very much a realist view on things. I wasn't completely like, oh, I'm not even questioning the pliers exist. I wasn't getting there. I was more of I'm questioning more of the oughtness, the meaning, the morals, the virtues.
You're trying to jump the Izod gap.
I wasn't trying to jump the Izod gap. I was trying to find the justification, another ought that I couldn't disagree with. But the problem was I was going down and down and down, and it was completely materialistic, completely. And it didn't help. And I got to a very, very dark place. There was one point when eventually, weirdly enough, I did intellectualize at one point. I went, technically, I couldn't even believe this nihilism, because to believe the nihilism was still having to assume things which couldn't justify itself. So technically, you got into a contradiction. Again, so one of these wonderful contradictions pop up again, which means then so when intellectualize things, then I had to kind of some way of transcend myself. And out of desperation, to a certain extent, I went, you know what? I'm going to try this something called praying. I've never done it in my life, literally. And I actually tried it and begged, effectively, for a question. I asked, honestly, and I won't say what else because it is quite private. And it got answered. And it terrified me. Literally terrified me. I went, right, this is not just random. This is a very specific question, and I got a very specific answer. And I went, what? To put it bluntly. So I didn't do it again for a while. So I tried again later, like a few weeks later, honestly again. And I asked an honest question. I got an honest answer. Now, the answer didn't come in the way you expect either, but you did get it. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, it was a few hours later and then you got the answer. It wasn't like on that spot. But the answer was also very related to what the question was. So it wasn't like, so you could, if you was again, skeptical, it's just coincidence. It's just a coincidence. I'm like, That's a very, very bizarre coincidence.
Well,
You have to
like
question that.
I made
Yeah.
a tweet today, and the tweet was basically, well, like from the unknown, the answers need to come, right? And so,
Yeah.
what are you doing to be receptive, right? And like
Yeah.
when you start opening the door, like, answers will come. Like,
yeah. And all I'm saying is this is terrifying, and it still is, by the way. This is absolutely terrifying. You answer effectively into nothing, a question into nothing, and you get something from nothing. It's like, wait, what? Something I literally did not have any idea. Literally, I could not have answered this myself. So it's always sometimes the answers are just coming from like speaking to someone, and then they say something very specific, which I didn't even bring up, but they did. We're like, wait, what? Why did you say that? And they went, what do you mean, why did I say that? I was just thinking at the time, kind of thing. And they went, okay, sure, kind of thing. Or sometimes it was just randomly, you find it when it comes around, and something's happened, and it's like series of events. It's like this, what? It's like watching a comedy show in many ways. They all just kind of pile on top of each other, and it's like, what? So that's kind of that thing. So it wasn't more of I didn't say necessarily took a leap. I thought, you know what, I've got nothing to lose kind of view. I'll try this thing.
That's also a leap, right? That's just
which is a leap. Yeah, it's very much like I'll try anything. I'm desperate kind of
Yes.
view.
Just a leap up. There's not.
Yeah, it's just more of I'm jumping up. I'm not jumping over. I'm just going to jump up, guys. Hopefully, I don't hit my head on the ceiling. Kind of view. And I didn't hit my head, or maybe I did. I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of that kind of thing. And then you start. Because the weirdest thing is all of before this, clearly I'd read even loads on the history of religion and stuff. I was always fascinated about why do people believe what they believe. So I already had a lot of the stuff there. But let's put it this way, the intellect tradition didn't convince me at all.
Okay, that's interesting. So
yeah.
Did you change your mind on that?
On which bit?
The intellectual tradition? And
no.
No.
I didn't change my mind. I just had something else that it would
change it for you.
Change it for me as well. Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, but it got changed then. I'm sorry, like
in the sense that it kind of got changed is what I'm saying.
Okay, and so what do you think made it? I guess gave the authority to approach it differently. Like that's a leap, right? Like
no, it is a leap, and it is.
Or a push.
The first thing is I would say the intellectual stuff does help. It tells you it's more in the negative sense. It tells you what things don't make any sense, what you shouldn't believe. It doesn't tell you what you ought to believe. There's the problem. It's more of no, not to say you shouldn't. In the intellectual sense, it's more of a saying, assuming these assumptions, axiomatically, these things would lie. So if you have these axioms, you can treat it very mathematically. There's no value in it whatsoever. Like it is very much when you read a lot of these things, people forget that they're not actually bringing in the whys, they're just bringing in the whats or the how sometimes. But so the leap was more of I was still, even to this day, I still ask the why questions. I'm like, look, how do you answer these why questions? And it's the Iseult gap, obviously. Everything always comes back to the Iseult gap, obviously. But something that is like, what kind of made me change my mind wasn't change my mind. It's just more of a realizing you shouldn't. It's more of you shouldn't reduce it to one or the other. It's more of when I realized you shouldn't reduce the ought to an is, effectively, is what I was trying to do. But even though I know you couldn't, I was trying to.
Yeah, that's.
It's more of was opening me up to a different way of experiencing things, and also in that way, yeah.
So would holistic be a word that applies there?
Say that again.
Holistic.
No, I hate that word so much. But I think you're going to probably hate this. It's probably more dualistic.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so what are you trying to say when you say dualistic? Like, you mean holding two things at once? Is that
no
dualism?
The dualism in this case is that there can be two things and they're separate. One's not reducible to the other. They do participate together. They relate to each other, but they are separate. And that's weird. The weird thing is that with my other views, it was trying to be not holistic, but reductionist, always reduce it down to the matter,
Mm-hmm.
without realizing actually, yes, there is matter, but there's also other things, and those things participate with the matter. And also they are separate, they're distinct things. Like you can say, but there's multiple dualisms. It's not just one dualism. There's dualisms going on here. And you can split it as many times as you want. And you can unify them as well and get a whole to them. But then the problem is when you think of the whole, it's not really, for me at least, I'm not saying it isn't useful. It's just not useful to me. And for me, when I realize, I'm like, no, there are separate things, and you should be trying to participate in these separate things differently.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm interested in this whole, right? Because you seem to be allergic to this, which is
it's not
fine.
allergic to. We probably have discussed it anyway, but like you're very much more Platonistic than me, and I'm more Aristotelian in that regard. So I'm much more my instincts are more down than up.
Mm-hmm.
And we've sometimes got little arguments before, but you want to unify and look at more the thing that unifies them together. Where I'm more looking at like the particulates of things, and I'm more interested in that. And clearly, that's what happens in my life and my jobs I've chosen, like more sciencey background. Like I was a physicist by profession and such, and I love understanding the particulars of things more on that than sometimes it's useful to know what is the unifying principle sometimes, because then knowing the unifying things tells you more about the particulars in that regards.
Right.
But it's very much knowing that sometimes that there are particulars is what I'm trying to say, rather than just the unifying principle, because sometimes that unifying principle isn't the useful thing.
Well, okay. Well, that.
And I'm saying useful. When I say useful, I'm using a very vague term of meaning useful as well, by the way. I'm being as vague as possible.
Well, but there's a utilitarian ethic behind it.
No, not utilitarian, pragmatic in this case.
Well, yeah, but
no, I'm being very careful.
But basically, what I'm hearing when you say that is that the principle is in service to.
No. I'm not saying the principle is in service. No,
okay, but that's the way that it.
No. I'm not saying that at all. I know that's how you're interpreting it. And it's really hard. Sometimes I just haven't got the language to explain it. Sometimes, and I struggle. So in this particular case, it's more of what I normally focus on. I wasn't saying it's in service of. It isn't. It's just that for me, I am more naturally inclined to look at the particulars than the principle.
Right, because they're graspable then more.
They're graspable to me. Like this pair of pliers is graspable to me. This wire is graspable. This pen is graspable. Which is why I was getting the more inclinations to be the more materialistic again when stuff like that as a kid. But it doesn't mean clearly, okay, the graspable thing. Okay, why am I grasping this is the first question. What is its use? What's its function? What is about this? What is it about a pair of pliers that makes there's all these questions you start asking, and it starts less becoming about the particular. It is more about the principles behind it, or the more unifying aspects. And then you start being there, which is they're not because of this. The pair of pliers is a very low thing on that hierarchy of the things.
Right. It's really low because, like, when you were saying all these questions, I'm like, yeah, if you're gonna look at those questions, you're not gonna find any answers.
No, you're not. You're not, and that's the point. I've just picked up a pair of pliers. Great. That's a tool. So clearly, in a tool sense, you've got a means, a reason for as to achieving a goal. You've got a telos in that regards. It's a tool for that, achieving that. You can use it in other ways, poorly, whatever you want to do. It's just like I'm thinking of it from a tool standpoint. But not everything is a tool. And that's why you brought up the utilitarian thing. And I'm like, I wasn't thinking it from a utilitarian standpoint. I'm thinking more pragmatic standpoint. I'm very anti-utilitarian. Very much so, even in my instincts.
Well, we can be anti things and slip into them, right? Like that's
no. Even in my instincts, I'm really not.
Okay.
And there are certain things where I can be too allergic to it at times. Even the smallest amount of it can set me off.
So I guess like there's a dance, right, between the highest, right? Because you got to have the highest correct, because if you don't, then you're misguided, right?
Yeah.
And then you can't have your head there all the time, because then the word aloof came up, but like that's probably not you're lost, right? Your head in the clouds, and so there's a dance that you need to do, right, where like I take the example of a deer, right? Like the deer looks down to the food, it grazes,
Yep.
then it looks up, right? Like looks around, it walks, looks
Yep.
forward, like looks around again, right? So there's this breadth,
Yeah.
this movement of these two aspects, and they always are in a dance, and they have to be in a balance as well. And then the question is, well, what's your guiding principle, right? Like is your guiding
no.
principle...
It's the word you said, guiding principle, and I agree with you there.
Right.
The thing is, the reason why I was talking about the utilitarian thing is the utilitarians in general, or general consequentialists in general, don't have guiding principles. They have,
or they're implicit, right? Like that.
No. So they don't have guiding principles. The way that they view the world, and you can just do it by talking to them, is that they have a ideal they're aiming at. Yeah, that's not a principle. I would say there's a difference between a principle and an ideal. Like ontologically speaking, they are separate things entirely, and they are much more caring about the goal, the end, than they are about the process. Well, the guiding principle is very much bedded in the process itself. You are thinking about the process, and I'm not saying in a guiding process. Well, a guiding principle isn't necessary to govern the role, the end. The guiding principle is an end in itself in that regard. I'm trying to use the word end, but it's not an end. But yeah,
it's not an end. It's
not an end. It's a deontological category if you want to be technical.
Yeah.
While the consequentialist one, so that's an ideal is more consequentialist, while the principle is a deontological, and that's why a lot of the utilitarian folk always try and reduce it back down to an ideal. Oh, the only reason you have that principle is you're trying to achieve this ideal. I'm like, no.
It's more like a container, right? Like the principle is that which contains the activity, right? Like it governs it.
It's the governor of that activity. Yeah.
Right.
It's the governor of your actions itself.
Right.
The actions.
So thereby it's an authority, right? And so like I was asking you earlier about what gave the authority for the leap or whatever, right? Like this.
Yeah.
There's always an authority that justifies the toolness of the tool.
Oh yeah.
Right? And so I think it's always appropriate to look from the perspective of the authority, and then you're an agent in the name of that authority. But that's just my vision. Anyway, how do I want to? Yeah, so I want to go to the God thing, right, and the religion thing.
Yes,
from here,
sure.
Because I think since we're talking about this divide, we're looking up and looking down, right? Like ultimately, you have to say, well, okay, there's principles, but then
indeed.
What's the principle of principles, right? Like how do I govern or not? How do my principles get governed, right? There's something going on there, and like
unfortunately,
right, and since you're saying, well, I like to look down, which is like, well,
it's not that I don't like to look down. It's more of I like to look down so I can then look up. So again, to give an analogy in my life, one piece of advice I always give to people who want to learn stuff is like, look, always learn the level below. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm a physicist by profession. I worked at university, and I used to do like condensed matter physics. So the very, very small, the very, very cold, right? So most people in physics say, oh, the high energy stuff, you're doing things with cyclotrons and all this stuff, and you're smashing things together at high speeds. I'm like, no, I'm thinking the exact opposite. That's still small, but really low energy. So low energy, it's so cold, and they start losing their identities, and they have to make a new state of matter called Bose-Einstein condensates and such. So that's what I used to do. But the thing is, at that level, you're doing a lot of engineering is the first thing. But you also have to know the quantum mechanics. But it was sometimes useful to know the level below. And the level below quantum mechanics is quantum field theory. Quantum field theory is the level below, but I knew that level, and it did help me from time to time. But most of the time I was working at the quantum mechanics, or even just the engineering level, really. And that was the levels I was working at. And even in my day job mainly, which is now programming, I do know the levels below, so they can help me at the level I'm working at. But those are all very much this is what I'm saying from a teaching standpoint. Many people don't know the levels below, so they don't even actually understand what they're actually working at. Now, I'm not saying you have to know all the levels, because, by the way, there's no bottom really on most of it. It's very much like just a level, one level below. That's fine. Just stay there, please. And then it'll help you, because then it'll help you know, look there. And you can even look above after that. You know, actually, there's levels above it, and I can see how it scales now. And you can see the pattern of the scaling going on.
So do you think that's a necessity? Like you need to look down in order to look up, or like?
I don't. A necessity, I think, is the wrong way of phrasing it.
But it's a way that you habitualize and familiarize yourself. Like,
It is. I think I've written this down before, by the way, my actual thoughts, just to clarify the exact terminology and everything, because I've always kind of, I'm awful at words and I have to write it down. I'm not a writer. Like, oh God, what am I thinking of? Sorry, shouldn't be saying blasphemous stuff there, but yes. So I'm just trying to think of the phrase that I'm looking for here. I'm not saying to look down to look up, but also to look up, you need to look down. Like, you need to do both. Like, to even know there's an up, you need to know there's a down kind of a view thing. In that regard, is the poorest way of putting it.
So,
but there's, yeah. Sorry, I was just trying to phrase what I'm even thinking in my own head at the moment. It's really head and mind and everything. All good. It's all fun. All fun.
Maybe you're gonna go down a level, and then you.
Oh no, I usually can. Unfortunately, sometimes you can go. For me, another thing is like when I was a physicist, I'm awful at remembering definitions. But things that I usually knew, I used to be good at equations, and I didn't remember always the high level ones. I could always know the lower ones, the more fundamental things, and then to ride the higher level one if necessary.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Because I didn't have to remember the higher thing. I could just go from the lower and emerge up the higher one.
And then I needed to reinvent math during the exams, and I was like, yeah, this is
no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not going down into set theory, man. But sometimes I was just very much like, I can't remember how this equation is. I know the process. I knew the process of how to get there. So I just did the process, and then I got there. So the thing to me was more of a not remembering the how do I have it, the goal,
path.
But the path.
You remember the path, yeah, and the navigation on the path. Yeah, that's what
exactly. That's how I've always worked, and like I always had to, like when I was remembering for exams, there was a lot of easy marks learning definitions, and I used to just literally memorize them the morning before the exam, and then when they came up, I could just effectively metaphorically barf them onto the page. And then they'd be gone again after I've got off the exam, which personally, I think that doesn't test anything about my knowledge, but it wasn't, it was just remembering like, I know a definition, but in real life, I don't care about those definitions. It's more of, I know how to get the path to there.
Exactly.
That's the thing. It's very much, those definitions are just,
they're not functional, right? Those are just random names.
Random names and words. I forget people's names from day to day. Like I can't remember my name at times. That's not even a joke. Like, because it's not, who cares? It's a name. Right. I could call myself blah blah.
I can't remember your name at times too. So like
that's fine. Yeah, I mean, it's just names to me just don't matter, because it's very much, it's not necessarily arbitrary. It's just more of a, like I can tell you someone's about to tell you that entire life, but forget their name.
Right. I have that problem too. So to go back to the problem of religion and what role it plays, right, or what it would play for you, because like I see religion as maintaining and cultivating the relationship to what's above, right? And the problem with looking down is that you might get your head stuck in the sand, or you get sucked into a rabbit hole, right? And so there's this this dance that you need to do, where you come, you're like an eagle or something, right? And you're looking down, and you're like, there's the mouse, right? And then you go back up, right? And there's an ease that you can develop in that movement, right? And I think that's the role of religion. And so the first question I have is, how do you know, how are you, like, for yourself, evaluating whether you're in the right relationship?
I don't.
Okay.
And I know that's not an answer you were wanting, maybe.
Well, do you
Because
think there's value in that? Like, do you
I
think
think
that's possible?
evaluating it explicitly means you're actually not taking it seriously. That's like sounds like a contradiction again. Sorry, that just seems to be the theme today. But the sense is how if I myself cannot evaluate it is what I'm trying to say. Everyone around me should be able to evaluate. Everyone else should be evaluating it for me. And then I would know indirectly through others.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And I know that sounds I know I probably not answered it directly, but maybe.
But are you like, there's some things that you can evaluate yourself, right? But
no, there are certain things, obviously, but I mean, the general thing is about you're asking in a very specific thing, and I'm like, I shouldn't be doing it because I will be misevaluated. Because the question is, what am I evaluating it against?
Okay, let me rephrase the question then. How do you organize your life in such a way that you have people around you that do that evaluation for you?
Well, the first thing is you have sure you've got friends and family. Make sure you actually go and see them. I make sure do stuff. And there's always the selfish thing because clearly I enjoy it. I like it. Want to see them. It's healthy for me. It's healthy for them. But then there's the thing is that's how you do it because if you live alone a life, like you don't see anybody any day, then you can't. And that clearly, first off, it's kind of like that's not good for you. I know that's not good for me on like in like a deep level. And I think most people understand that there's an intuition there. You know that's not correct, like good thing. But then there's the second thing is like that's not a good thing, so you shouldn't do it. Shouldn't. So therefore, the question is those other things that you do. Then I can from an intellectual thing. I'm like, okay, now I can see if like if how are people treating me when I'm dealing that shows me something else, and not just that. You can also hear how people talk about you sometimes, and how they talk about you in that regard is also another reflection. So it's very much the, I'm not saying I'm trying to judge myself by how others think of me, but more of how do people not think of me, but act with me.
So I agree with you to a certain level, right?
Okay.
I think there's things that the people around you are capable of tuning into, but I also think that there's things.
Yeah, there's certain things as well, but I think if you were talking in the context of like how am I doing my practices well, kind of thing.
It's you're doing practices in the first place, right? Like that's already a big deal, right? Because that's one of the ways that you're you're maintaining that you're true, right? Like
yes.
So yeah, maybe go into that a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes practices can be quite simple. And for me, this is where you were asking earlier very, very much question. Like, it's not just like, it's more, how do you have a belief in God or something like that to a certain extent? But then you don't effectively join a church kind of view. Because it's very much, that is a big leap. But it's not just a big leap in many ways. There's a big leap of commitment as well. And I'm not saying there's a fear of commitment, but it's just, to me, it's very much more of when you make a commitment, you do have to be at least a little bit sure. You're not just arbitrarily choosing something. But also, it's very much like, okay, I'm trying to think of a very weird way of framing this, but is commitment in itself is not necessarily a good thing? Like we're saying, you have a commitment to an awful girlfriend. Why are you committing to her? First off, you're not married. That's the second thing. But secondly, like, don't. Like that's not. You shouldn't have that commitment for no reason. In that sense, in that particular case, I know it's a bit of a random example.
Well, yeah, there should be a justification on some level, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And for me, it's more of I think this is also partially the other thing is some of those aspects where people ask me questions. Well, everyone who asks this question, I'm like, you went to church pretty much all your life, even when you were a child. If you ever did become an atheist, you weren't brought up as an atheist. This isn't foreign to you. But for me to make that commitment is so foreign. It's like me going and saying, you know what? I am now going to live in the middle of India. Why? I just need to go live in a different country and make a commitment. It's like, what? It is just something to me that maybe I'm disabled in some way. Literally, maybe I've got something wrong with me because I didn't get brought up in a certain way. There was something wrong in my mind or brain or whatever, which to me is like, either I don't want to make the commitment and it's not allowing me, or I'm like, maybe I'm not able to make the commitment, at least not yet, without something else making that commitment for me, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't think I'm going to be making the commitment. Something else is going to make it for me.
Okay, so that's fascinating, because we were talking about the binding element, right, and how things emerge, right, and how society doesn't provide that. Right? And I would argue that if you're committed, that's what builds that integrated structure, right? Like the natural emergence of things, right? Like they can only emerge in a body, right? Like something that's able to hold you as a member of it.
But there's also a very big top-down thing. So in England and the United Kingdom in general, just to say the entirety of the United Kingdom, it's a very, very atheistic country. Like, of the people who even self-report to be of, let's say, Christian, to put it this way, only 6% of them actually even go to church.
Yeah.
And some of them,
there's a lot of problems. Yeah,
there's a lot of problems. First thing, but the thing is, this society we have, and also the leader and the culture is very that much there. But and this is just a hypothesis. Let's say you've got King Charles, right? He is the head of the Anglican Church. If he started being a little bit more explicit about things, like from the top down, not bottom up, top down, things would start changing. Some people would start like, maybe I should start doing this as well. Because then there's a weird thing is culture.
It'd be normalized, right? Like,
it would start, first it'll be normalized. People wouldn't be with that. So they would be like, okay, I'll start doing this. But this is the weird thing is fashion. What is fashionable is a top-down event. It's never bottom-up. And there are certain types of people, I'll say the cool people that dictate what is fashionable. Like if you've ever seen the film, oh God, have you ever seen the film The Devil Wears Prada? In that, all I'm going to say is there's two characters. There's the Meryl Streep character, and then there's the Anne Hathaway one. And this may sound like a very weird question. Which one do you relate to more, Meryl Streep or Anne Hathaway?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer the question because I don't remember the
No. So if you don't, it doesn't matter. It's fine. Don't worry. I'm going to explain the film. So in the film, Anne Hathaway is this. But she's a bit of a woman, just normal woman. At the end of the day, she thought, I'm trying to do fashion stuff. I'll get into the fashion industry, kind of thing. And she's just thinking, I'm going to stay myself. I'm going to be all right, kind of thing, kind of this like this. I'm just going to do this. And then you've got Meryl Streep, who's literally the head of it. She is the one who's dictating what is going to be fashionable that week. That thing, what's choosing all this stuff, and she's dictating it down. And interesting, you can see the Anne Hathaway character initially, she starts slowly morphing into it, and she starts actually being effectively from the top down, being molded by the Meryl Streep character into what it is, and she then actually becomes Meryl Streep's effectively, I'll say, right-hand woman in that regard. Until eventually she does effectively just break off. It's very much like, okay, there's a redeeming aspect. But the thing is, in that sense, is what is fashionable, what is the cultural aspect, is a top-down thing. It is never bottom-up. So the problem is when I was like, this is where I was kind of saying, like, if I was going to make a commitment, I wouldn't make it the choice. Something from top-down, whatever that may be, would be making that choice for me. And I think this is the case for most people. Most people, well, not going back to the pub thing anyway, it's just very much people just went to the pub. That's what you do. They didn't think about it. It wasn't a bottom-up thing, really. Yes, how they came about was bottom-up, but the reason as to why they go is not that. It's a top-down thing, and that's the thing is the whyness comes from the up, the what, the how, not that the things. There's certain things that emerge and certain things that emanate, and it's that relationship and knowing which bits are in relation to it, which is why. That's why the question people ask, "Oh, why don't you ask make the commitment of something to choose, let's say go to a church,
Okay,
or whatever it is. I'm like,
then
it's to me, it's like you're asking the wrong question to me. That's why I'm like,
I'm going to go back to my tweet, right? My tweet
Yeah.
was, what are you doing so that you're open to the potential, right? Like so in order for the top down to inform you, right? Which is fair enough. Like, are you placing yourself in a position where you can be informed?
But there's a caveat there. Which potential? If you're opening up to a potential,
but hold on.
Yeah.
Like, that's always
no. I know what
right?
you're saying.
Like now you're just saying, well, okay, like I'm just in analysis paralysis, and I'm
No. I'm not saying it's analysis paralysis. I am saying if you open up yourself to anything, that's not a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Because any other bad things can get into there, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's why there's a tradition that tells you.
But there's a tradition. It's again, the tradition is just how things are. Obviously, that's what. Of course, that's what you do, kind of thing. But that's the problem. Is that when you open up the potential, the problem is the potential there? Is the potential there? And I don't know the answer to that question. And you can say, oh, I could always just try. And the answer is yes, I could try. But it may lead me down and it is the terror. It is the terrified of certain of like, where does this lead? Because to a certain extent, I do know where this leads. Certain paths. I know certain paths will lead me certain ways. I don't know all of the paths, obviously. I know there are multiple paths, but I know some of them will lead me to a place where I do not want to go. Nor should I.
Okay, so there's a couple things there, right? So Peterson says that if you aim for the star, right, like so the star is here, and you're starting off here, and then the first time you shoot here, right, and then you shoot there, right?
Oh yeah.
Sometimes you shoot below where you started, but like that's going to be necessary to build the contrast, right? Like, and it's unavoidable in some profound sense, right? Like you can have the best spiritual guide ever, right? And you're still gonna have to walk yourself, right? And he can put, yeah, but you need to go there. And you're like, you mean there? Like, and because you don't have the tools, like you're gonna have to go there and see that you're not going to the place.
It's hard to know. But that's the thing, is the potential there is that the reason why, and again, it's the question is other people asking for a specific question to a certain potential. I'm like, I'm not even sure that's the right potential, because also a lot of people are coming from very different contexts, different upbringing. Like when I think of religion, I am not thinking of it as just like, wow, it's just one church you drink. Like, but many people do. I'm thinking like, no, it's the entire culture that I am brought up in. It's the entire culture around me. Like, I do not think of them as separate. Like, I'm not separating. It's the way I view the world entirely. That is what religion is, right? It's how I view the world, what my assumptions about the world actually are.
The way you bind yourself to the world.
Well, the way I bind myself to that as well. That's the point. It's all of this. Yes, you can do the religio thing, yes, with binding. Well, but that's the point.
But, like, I don't think that the religion is that which comes at you, because what comes at you, you filter. Right, and that by which it filters is the way that you bind yourself, right? You bind yourself to certain signals, and you choose to ignore others, right? And like the whole idea, like, and I think this is in Plato, and I think this is in Christianity, and like I think it's probably in Stoicism as well. It's like that there's this convergence, right? Like when you learn how to bind yourself, you're gonna attune more to certain signals which are true, and you're gonna learn to recognize and disregard. And so what I see is that most religious structures are like an interface, right? They're like, okay, like this is the way that I'm gonna recognize signals, right? This is the framework in which I'm gonna have them appear to me, right? And this is how I'm going to filter it, and this is how I'm going to do my error correction, right? And obviously they're all tuning into the same good at some level, right?
Yeah.
But they're not tuning into it the same way and with the same quality, right? So And so when you're asking me what is the right choice, I'm like, well, any choice is better than no choice, right? And then
No, I don't know if I agree with that, because I think no choice is a choice still, by the way, but to a
okay,
certain
yeah,
extent.
fair enough. But
But
it's
no,
not a
in this
positive
case, it's
choice,
just
right?
more of a. It's just very much a. There's a lot of reasons why people ask that question. It's always much like there's a lot of things that bother me about it.
Mhm.
And I can break it down. I could be here for hours breaking that down, which is
No, yeah,
why
like if I put on my skeptical cap, I can
I'm not even
tell
being
you.
skeptical. It's more of I can usually, when I'm talking to a certain person, I can pretty much guess what they're talking, why they're asking me that question. Some people don't, like, and they're the ones I'm really interested in. But it is just, how do I phrase it? I'm trying to find a good way of phrasing it. It's just very much like, maybe the question I always ask is, why are you asking me this question?
Mhm.
Like, that's the simplest thing. And clearly, we're not talking about any particular person here at the moment. I could always ask you, like, why are
Mhm.
you asking me this? Because, but
Well,
I already know for you. That's the thing, is I already know that's the thing. So
what's
I'm not
my
asking
answer?
you. It's more of, oh God, I know what the answer is. That's the problem. I don't like it. I don't like it. That's the thing.
What's the answer?
It's more of a do it. Well, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Actually, no, I don't know. I'll lie. I'm going to correct myself and apologize.
Mm.
Or maybe I do. And this is probably just a bit of cowardice. And there is the thing, is maybe I don't want to say I'm wrong. Save face, stiff upper lip, and all that all. But okay, what? Okay, I'm going to just ask you bluntly. Why not? So why are you asking me?
Well, like, okay, like, why am I asking? Well, first of all, like I always like to push things, right?
Yeah,
Like that's
no,
just
no, I gathered that.
so
Um,
that's one reason, and the other reason is I'm genuinely curious,
mm,
and thirdly, like I don't think you have an answer,
no, I don't have an answer.
right?
No,
So
I don't.
that's kind of why I'm pushing. It's like, hey, you don't have an answer, bro. It's like,
No, I don't have an answer. And the thing is, um, I don't like many of the answers I'm being given either.
Mhm.
And when I say I like, it's not more of like a preference. It's more of I just think that's wrong.
Mhm.
And I think it's a lot of is, I say sometimes people are giving advice. And I'm like, your advice is just wrong. Like, it doesn't even apply anymore. Like, it may apply to you when you were young, back in the past, literally, maybe even just a decade ago. But it doesn't, and also may apply only where you live. Like, I live in a very different place to where a lot of people are talking. I live in a different time to people. Like, in a weird way, to explain this. Let's say someone was born in like 1980, lives a very different life to me, who wasn't born then. Like, it's okay, over more than a decade older than me. Okay, I grew up with the internet. I literally cannot imagine a time without the internet. Is one thing to explain. And to those people, they can imagine that. It's like, of course, I can imagine a time. Like, I can't. I can imagine a time, but it's not my time.
Mhm. Yeah. So I guess, yeah, like, so what I'm hearing is that you kind of feel stuck at the place
Yeah,
that you're
and I've been
thrown
this way
into, right?
for probably 2 years,
Right.
and I'm stuck.
And so in order to let go, right, you need something higher than
Yeah,
basically supplying you in your life, right? And having a trajectory that's somewhat reliable, right? And
yeah.
you have to exchange that for something which is not with a letter of intent of buying your product.
Oh yeah, and like,
Like,
it's clearly, I don't think of it as a. I'm not thinking of it from a business standpoint. I'm literally just saying, in a weird way, I want to get to the point where I don't have a choice in it anymore.
mhm.
or not just a choice, but that's the wrong word of phrasing it, but the it's so blatantly obvious there's no other options.
Yeah, it's like the obvious step, right? Yeah.
It's the obvious step, and that's the point. And to me, nothing is obvious at the moment. And the people, the advice you get is very much like, that's obviously wrong.
Yeah.
But they don't see it, and they're like, you explain it to them, I'm like, they have no comprehension of why it's wrong because it worked for them.
Yeah,
or they think it works for them is more the answer, really.
that's even worse.
Like, you think it works for you. I'm not sure about that. And then that's kind of the thing. And I know that's why I'm stuck. I could make a leap, but for me, a lot of these things, when people say, oh, you could just do that, I'm like, you never actually had to make that leap. You just fell back into your old practices. Yes, it may have a different flavor to it. Like, for instance, someone going from, I don't know, Calvinist and they became an Orthodox or something like that. It's a different flavor, really.
Yeah.
It is a better analogy would be from going from like, again, a Hindu to a Catholic. That's a really big jump. Like, that's literally just a separate culture, not religion. You're like, I hate the word in that sense, but like, you have not so radically different. It's like, again, it's me like saying back earlier, I went, oh, we're going to live in the middle of India. It's like this, it would be a stranger in a strange land.
Yeah, it's born again, right? Like you'd be a new person. Like,
yeah, in a weird way. And it's not good. It's not good. And that's not good advice. But that's kind of the thing, is that people, I don't think they realize what they're asking for or telling me. I'm like, you don't realize what you're saying. And even when I tell you, you don't realize, which is why I don't like the question so much, because it's very much, I haven't found the answer. I'm stuck. I know you don't have the answer to a certain extent for what I'm asking for, at least. But I'd love to find it. And that's the search at the moment, at least for me, is to find that path and carry on the path. No, however long it takes me. And I'm going to guess when I do find that path and that part fork in the road, I'll have a choice.
Okay, cool. So I want to round it up a little bit. I think we came to a somewhat natural end.
That's good, yeah.
Maybe we should go into the Aristotle versus Plato thing.
Sure, if you'd like.
In the future. Well, like I think, yeah, maybe I should read more before we do that.
No, Aristotle's quite dry in many ways, but he's not hard to read in many ways either. And I do recommend reading. I always recommend Nicomachean Ethics, or Nicomachean, or however you pronounce that properly. I don't care. I'm English. I just read what I'm reading on paper. That's how I pronounce it. All the foreigners that are wrong, obviously, it's a bad joke. I'm making a joke. But it's a good. That's a good start.
Like, why are
I don't recommend the Poetics, because that's just very. It's not really worth it. But there are some good books. But again, I always recommend Nicomachean or whatever Ethics, because for some people I would say it's useful. Like, it's a practical thing. It's applied in many ways. It's applied ethics. But I think for someone like yourself, I'm not saying that's why you should read it. It's just more of it's a different way of focusing on things compared to how Plato phrases things. And Plato focuses on more of the unifying principles, while Aristotle's more of the how those other principles work together, and especially how those, in this case, virtues, how the virtues work together rather than how they work in isolation, or how they unify to be one idea of virtue itself.
Well, that's actually, yeah, maybe I should read that.
Yeah,
I'm actually trying to figure that out in my head right now. So
yeah, and it's quite weird to read if you're not used to it. Obviously, you probably should be okay, actually. But yeah, it's always you may not even agree with them. That's the thing.
Yeah,
I think you'll probably agree with a lot, but not all. I know you do, but I mean, you'll probably agree with a lot of it, but not all of it. Because I haven't read it in years. But it's one of those things where, as soon as I remember trying to read like a few pages, I went, oh, I know what this is all about. I don't need to read it anymore, kind of thing. I've read it enough that I've internalized it, kind of thing.
So yeah, do you want to reflect on the conversation? Like, is there something that stood out?
Yeah. I guess I would reflect. I'm just going to reflect on after the conversation. It's going to be reflect while I like lie in bed, which is how I normally do things. I'm either reflecting while walking the dog, lying in bed, or having a shower. That's usually what happens, and it's always the best places. It's literally the best places for me, at least.
Do you think that's related to your process thinking, right? Like,
yeah,
because the way that I go through things, right? Like I'm going through the motions and like I reconstruct what happens while I'm going through the process, and then I'm like trying to see whether there was an error, like should it go a little bit left or right?
No, so for me, it's more of a like, let's say I'm working on my job and I'm trying to figure out a problem. I've got like a bug in programming or something like that, and I struggle. So you know what? I go for a walk, take the dog out, and I'm just walking the dog. I'm literally mindless sometimes. Sometimes it's very quite mindless, and all of a sudden it comes to me out of nowhere. Like I've just kind of relaxed, came out of the environment, came out of that focus process, doing something more mundane process, and that is drawn me back to where it is. Or there's the second kind of view, is that sometimes on those processes, effectively I am, the best way I can describe it is an open prayer. Like I am literally talking aloud. Luckily I'm in the middle of the woods, so no one can hear me or think I'm crazy. And if they did, I'm like, oh, sorry, I was just speaking aloud. Don't worry, I'm insane. Usually kind of do that. And that usually enough to break, like, okay, whatever. Okay, you're insane. Fine, yeah. But that, in that sense, but when I'm doing that, I'm asking questions permanently aloud. Like I'm not, where do we this manual? I'm just, it's not like I'm having a conversation with myself.
Things.
No.
Necessarily.
Yeah. Like I'm asking questions. I'm asking questions to certain things. Let's just keep it vague as hell for a reason, because it's actually easier to keep it vaguer. It's more understandable then. And that's the thing. I'm just asking. And then that's less mundane in that case. It's not like mindless anymore. It's very mindful. But at the same time, it helps me go into a different process to clear another process, if you know what I mean, and make it more clear what the other one was. And that's how my mind works, at least. I know it's very weird. And I've explained how my mind works to other people before. And it's like, yeah, that's weird. I'm like, I know it is. I'm a weird bloke. Always have been. I don't think it's going to stop. I don't know about you, because I know you say you like to analyze it quite a lot and break down all the different paths and go down that way. And like, what could have done differently, kind of thing.
I'm basically spatially going through.
Yeah, same. I usually think very, very spatially. But I'm not necessarily. Well, sometimes can be a bit neurotic, which is kind of a bit of neuroticism that you can describing in a weird way. To go a bit psychologically again, but to tie it back to the beginning, obviously. But
right,
it's kind of
the spatial thing can get compulsive, right? Where you just like keep walking the same path, and it's like
yeah.
But I kind of got rid of that part. It's just like, let's just see what happens. But like it allows me to be really true, right? Because like there's like no like there's no left here, right? Like there's this reliability in the movement that makes sense for whatever reason. Like it just makes sense. Anyway,
I think that's a good place to end. I think it's a good place to end.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Please leave reflections, and we'll do a follow-up sometimes. Thank you for
and don't forget to smash that like button or like that smash button, however you want to phrase that.
And the subscribe thingy.
and the subscribe thing, which is what here nowadays, isn't it?
Somewhere
somewhere, right? Yeah. And gotta ding that bell, gotta do all these YouTube thingers. I'm a YouTuber, right? Yeah.
Ding ding. Okay. Bye.
So, hi.